I was a sex worker because it seemed like an easy source of income with a very low threshold.
I worked on the streets, in private apartments, large brothels, and sauna clubs. And I had at least 25 to 35 customers a day.
I really pushed myself beyond my limits, which I felt both physically and mentally.
I think this job is the worst job on earth that anyone can have.
My name's Vivian. I'm still 27 years old, and I come from the beautiful Ruhr area. I currently work as a social worker with teenage girls, and I was a sex worker in the escort business from 2018 to the end of 2022.
Nebenbei als Prostituierte im Escort gearbeitet. Es ist einerseits schwierig.
On the one hand, it's difficult for me to accept that I was once in prostitution. In other words, to acknowledge this identity that I have or had, and that it's also part of me. And on the other hand, of course, dealing with men every day or being confronted with the fact that men are everywhere and that every man could be a client. That's often something that haunts and is with me in everyday life.
Etwas, was mich im Alltag verfolgt und begleitet.
I'm Christina. I'm 32 years old and I have a 2-year-old daughter. I left sex work 4 years ago. I was forced into prostitution for about 10 years and now live in a shelter. It's very important for me to be a good mother to my daughter, because I never had a mother. My challenges with my daughter in everyday life are to allow physical closeness. Tenderness is a problem for me because it reminds me of my past. When I was doing sex work, I was groped by so many men every day that I closed my body off from myself. And now, when my daughter touches me, I experience these strange feelings of disgust.
I always had to keep a close eye on my money for everything. I feel like my whole youth was defined by this lack of money. I thought it might get better after finishing high school when I did my year of social work. I thought I'd have a bit of income then, but that was also deducted from me, or us, because we received state benefits. I decided to register on a site and join an escort company. I just wanted to afford more than the bare necessities, to live a little. When I started doing sex work, I had very low self-esteem. I had a certain image of myself. I thought the only way I could get positive attention and validation is by having sex with men. And somehow reduce myself to that. I thought it was normal for men to have access to my body. I thought I wasn't allowed to say no, that I'd be uptight and a prude if I did. I think that was the main reason I went into sex work. It was almost as if it would have happened automatically at some point.
Dazu gekommen.
My childhood was very traumatizing. I can still remember many situations at my parents' house. I was at most 3 years old, and I was sitting on my bed at night, tearing my toenails out. My whole bedsheet was covered in blood. I was taken away from my parents and went into foster care. I didn't do well there at all because of all the violence and coercion. I was then sent from my foster family to a children's home. When I was 18, I was with my mother. She sold me to a Moroccan pimp because she was a serious drug addict and a sex worker herself. The Moroccan pimp then took me to a big city and forced me to work there. After a while, he sold me on to another pimp, and then at some point I was sold on again. It went on like that for years. I endured the scene by doing drugs. I was severely addicted to cocaine. Cocaine numbed my emotions. When I was in the scene, I thought about suicide a lot. I often had bad thoughts about myself, that I wasn't worth anything, that I didn't deserve anything other than to sit there and serve customers all day. In all my years, I've never seen anyone doing voluntary sex work. I'm sure there are women who do it voluntarily, but not in the scene where I come from.
It became harder to start investigations into crimes related to sex work. The reason for this was the abolition of important criminal provisions. The new legal situation, along with the EU's eastward expansion, which added Romania and Bulgaria to the Union, also led to an explosion of the market in Germany. I remember an ad by an outfit from the US explaining why Germany was the ideal destination for sex tourism. Prices are low, everything's regulated, everything's legal. That was the company's conclusion. You won't find these conditions in any other country in the world.
Das Fazit des Veranstalters, das findet man in keinem anderen Land der Welt.
I was leading parallel lives. At the time, I was doing my year of voluntary social work at an elder care facility. After my work was done, or even later in the evening, I went to see my customers by train. I got up at 6 a.m. the next morning to do my normal job. My memories of doing sex work are almost like a fog. But I always had this feeling of extreme dislike towards my clients. I was filled with feelings of disgust and rejection, the feeling of, what am I doing here? I also had situations where I was simply terrified and was alone with men somewhere where I didn't even know where I was. I didn't know which village I was in. It was the middle of the night. I had to rely on a strange guy to drive me home. I knew I had to have sex with this man or something could happen to me. I had extreme physical reactions. I had constant stomach pains and infections, like chronic vaginal infections, because my body resisted doing this work so much. At some point, I switched from escort services to working as a dominatrix. Some men want you to urinate on them. Some men want you to inflict a lot of pain on them, even to the point of bleeding. That's a huge responsibility, of course. And it's just disgusting. In my opinion, these men were often extremely mentally disturbed. They needed a therapist, not me.
I experienced a lot of violence. Some of my pimps put cigarettes out on my body, threw me out of windows, beat me with a baseball bat, left me unconscious on the street, locked me in the trunk of my car, and many other things that I don't want to talk about. Even though I was paid for it, being with a customer was psychological rape, even if I allowed it in exchange for money. Mentally, I experienced rape every day. Sex work became increasingly difficult at some point because of the cut-rate prices offered by Eastern European women who came to Germany to work. Towards the end, I only had enough money to pay for my room. To pay my daily rent of around 160 euros, I sometimes had to serve 6 customers. Towards the end, I could only afford 1 meal a day because I still had to finance my drug addiction and my pimp. The night before I left, my pimp threatened to throw me out of the window from the 3rd floor. I was afraid that he'd kill me. Then he beat me mercilessly. When he had left and I couldn't see him anymore, I dialed a number given to me by street workers in my neighborhood and got help.
Gewählt, die mir damals mal im Milieu zugesteckt wurden von Streetworkern und habe mir helfen lassen.
I had carried the number with me for many years. I never called it out of shame, and also out of fear of what awaited me in normal life, and also out of fear that I'd be followed. I went back to the scene because I couldn't cope with normal life. I didn't know what to do with myself, with all the emotions that come up after stopping cold turkey and going back to normal life. I decided that I'd rather go back to where I'd always isolated myself, because there I could be me. In normal life, I was a completely different person. I hadn't known myself like that for many years. It felt really strange, and I couldn't stand it. If there hadn't been a shelter like that, I'd probably be dead. Because I would have either killed myself or a pimp would have killed me.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Women are afraid to testify because they fear reprisals. I've seen it so many times. Women are attacked by the perpetrators, or their families are threatened in their home country. And that's why the number of successful proceedings is so low. Of the few recorded cases, only very few, about 20%, led to a conviction. The rest have to be dropped, precisely for these reasons, because proving guilt is so difficult.
My friends always supported me. They said, hey, I don't think it's good that you're doing this. I don't think it's good for you. They were always honest with me and worried about me. That annoyed me at first, of course, because I always said I was doing it voluntarily. You don't need to worry, I'm fine. But in hindsight, I'm so grateful that they questioned it.
Vivian seemed very withdrawn to me at the time, especially when I tried to talk to her and dig a little deeper. She always dismissed it as if it was almost an everyday thing. She said it was nothing that bothered her at all.
I did a lot of therapy, and that was definitely a deciding factor in my decision to leave. But above all, it was that I met someone back then who is now my partner. I really wanted to leave all that behind me, because I knew that this escort or dominatrix business could somehow destroy or ruin intimacy. Or my sex life.
Can you heat it up again in the microwave? Will you reheat the pizza in the microwave?
My
daily routine here at the shelter is that I get up early in the morning and take my daughter to daycare. I'm very grateful that I can do housework here or cook and do the laundry. I'm grateful to be able to talk to the staff or just sit at the table with the women and chat. I also go to counseling and occupational therapy, and I'm very grateful for the peace and quiet in my life, for not having to do anything.
I still remember very well when I told my mother that I was an escort. I think she cried. She took my hand, cried, and asked me how and why it had come to that. She also thanked me for telling her that.
When I first found out, I felt a bit guilty given our financial situation at the time. But after a few months, I came to see it differently. It was her decision, her choice, of course, and I accept that.
I didn't want to have my daughter at first. I wanted to give her up for adoption while I was pregnant. I thought I could never be a good mother. Then I allowed the staff to help me. I went to my regular checkups with a gynecologist until I was sent to the hospital when Kyra wasn't doing well during the pregnancy. It was only then that my maternal instincts kicked in. I think that was at the end of the 7th month. From then on, I fought for Kyra and for myself. I said I'm not going back to do sex work. I'm not giving her up. I'm keeping her, and I'm going to try to find a place where I can live with my daughter. I often compare myself with my mother. But I actually do exactly the opposite of what my mother does or did with us children. My mother left us unattended in the apartment for days on end. We children looked after ourselves. We never had a real mother, a mother who wakes the kids, makes breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There was no such thing. When my mom was back at home, all we saw was her lying on the sofa, coming off of some drug trip. Or she would fight with my father around the house. Those images have stayed in my head to this day. I'm not in touch with my mother. The last contact I had was when she sold me. I'd like to know what went wrong in her life that made her do something like that to her own daughter. Actually, I just want her to get better, to get well, to lead a normal life. I'd want to tell my mother that I love her, no matter what she's done, and that I've forgiven her.
So. Ja? Sehr schön, danke. Normal einpacken? Ja, ganz normal einfach so. Okay. Das ist super, danke. Unsere Kasse ist vorne.
Ich gehe nachher mit Freunden von mir.
I'll be going to the red light district later with friends of mine from the Sisters Association to try to talk to the women a bit. We always have sweets and a few flowers with us so that we can start a conversation and try to find out how the women are doing, what the situation is like. I'm involved with Sisters because it's a matter close to my heart. I think it's extremely important that the current legislation in Germany changes. I don't want women in Germany to continue to have to work under these conditions. And above all, I don't want women to continue to be seen as a commodity. I simply don't want this notion of the self-determined sex worker to be upheld any longer. Because for 95% of people, that is simply not the reality.
Some of them simply didn't speak German at all. We spoke to the first two in English. Their English was very good. Often you just don't understand each other at all, and then you're communicating only with gestures.
Or Google Translate or other programs to translate Romanian and Bulgarian into German.
Last fall, the European Parliament stated very clearly that prostitution is not a normal activity, that it violates human dignity. It stated that demand must be curbed and that clients, those buying sex, must be held accountable. We have to ask whether buying a person for sexual gratification is still appropriate in today's world. We have high ethical standards in our modern society, and in my opinion, this flies in the face of that.
I'd urge young women who are considering becoming sex workers or registering with OnlyFans or something like that, please don't do it. Ask yourself the question, what could it do to you? And above all, talk to people about it. And please don't let yourselves be influenced by the idea that sex work has anything to do with sexual self-determination or emancipation. Because you're selling part of your body, and it's all about the sexuality of men. I'm really happy to have stability in my life, something I didn't have for a long time. There are still many things I want to work on and need to work on. But I can say that I'm optimistic about the future. I know exactly what I want and what I don't want.
I'm looking to the future with a lot of courage, and I'm now daring to go to school to finish my degree. When I've finished school, I'd like to do something where I'm in contact with people. I'd like to work in a retirement home or with teenagers. That would be a nice job for me. And I could imagine doing it for the rest of my life. I'll raise Kyra so that she can stand up for herself. I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. I'm very grateful that I was able to rediscover things that are good for me, that I can do. I've always been brave and courageous. I've always stuck it out. I know I can hang in there and endure this too. I know I'll make it.
Und ich weiß, dass ich es schaffen werde.